You know, it's interesting looking around the world just to realize how cheap things are right now. Not that inflation hasn't made things more expensive, but things that are important, especially important to the image of God, have gotten to feel really cheap lately. Things like marriage, it just kind of feels like we can throw it away, or friendships that are challenging now bear the name toxic. And many in society tell us to shred toxic relationships. And a lot of that's done because there's now kind of easy buttons. There's divorce, or like we're going to talk about today, there's an over the counter medicine that acts as an abortifacient. The reality of this in this cultural moment is that we're in a dark place, especially for those of us that love kids and value marriage and family and relationships. Well, we know that we're called to face the darkness, and that's what we're doing here in the Celebrate Kids podcast, this daily segment called Facing the Dark. And so today we're going to turn to Dr. Kathy for some insight in how we can encourage meaningful relationships with our kids in a world that cheapens them with over-the-counter birth control pills. Let's turn now to Dr. Kathy Cook.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So Dr. Kathy, medical societies and advocacy groups have long called for birth control to be available over the counter. Now, an FDA expert advisory panel had recommended unanimously in May that Opill, which is an approved prescription that's been in use since 1973, be given by non-prescription approval. The FDA action, which significantly expands access to contraception across the U.S., comes a year after the Supreme Court eliminated the constitutional right for an abortion. Now, Dr. Kathy, Opill is a norgesterel. It's a progesterone-only contraceptive pill used to prevent pregnancy that is available now without a prescription. Opill works mainly by thickening the cervical mucus, which makes it difficult for sperm to reach the egg. I don't know if I'm getting too graphic here, but I think it's important to kind of talk about this because the other realities with this is that it may suppress the release of an egg from an ovary, and that can mean that it can increase ectopic pregnancy, ovarian cysts, and even liver disease. But this is now being given over the counter. So I want to ask you, I can't think of any over the counter medication that does something so severe, like normaling this normal function of the body in this way. What are your thoughts on this? What should we think as parents and adults as we kind of see this now given over the counter?
Well, your point is well taken. That is this too severe of an altering of normal function. You know, you and I don't know about every, over-the-counter medication, but I sure hear what you're saying. So then do we trust the FDA? Do we trust the pharmaceutical company who created it, where it's been used, with prescription only? Is it worth it? Those are questions that are certainly worth asking. I am super concerned about the ectopic pregnancy, which is extremely dangerous. Ovarian cysts, which I've had, are no joke, and liver disease. So again, you're trading something for something. But if I could say, Wayne, that my bigger issue with this, and I hope I'm not jumping ahead to where you might be taking us, but my biggest issue here is, teenagers who can think they can have sex and go pop a pill, or pop a bunch of pills and then have sex. Like, how many pills do you have to take before your mucus is thick enough to prevent the pregnancy? What if some kid who hears about this, pops a pill at 7 p.m., has sex at 8, and is quite confident no pregnancy will result? I doubt that that's the case. And so you're allowing potential children, oh my gosh, I hate saying that, to develop promiscuity, to develop or to make the choice for sexual intimacy, assuming that there's no risk, no consultation with the pediatrician, no consultation with the doctor, no appointment at a pregnancy resource center about what happens, no consultation with the mom or dad because it's over the counter. That's disgusting and extremely concerning to me.
Right. And I think it's incredibly concerning, partly because I just can't imagine that a teenager could walk into a pharmacy and just walk out with this prescription that does something to this degree to the body. But also, I was reading about Opill and what needs to be done to kind of have it work. And the pill needs to be taken at the same time every day in routine and rotation. And if you miss a day, or you miss it by an hour, or you miss it by 3 hours, you take the pill immediately. And then they encourage you to use other forms of contraception until Opill can get back into rhythm and you take it a number of days. So the dynamics of what this pill says it does is so specific, even in its administration, that I can't imagine like you giving this to some student or kid that comes in and takes this. and then what that does kind of later on down the road. It just seems really irresponsible. But it makes me kind of want to talk to you about this other dynamic. And the other dynamic is really pregnancy. And my friend Maria Bear over at the Colson Center, I've heard her say this before, that sometimes we look at pregnancy as kind of a bug in the system of being a woman. And like it's not part of the design of humanity. When we think of over the counter medication like this, especially medication that does something so dramatic to the body as this does, what does it say that we kind of teach our kids about maybe even like the natural systems that God has in place for humanity? Is that something that we should consider when we talk about kind of the different drugs or medications that we end up kind of bringing in to our home, especially something like this, where we look at pregnancy as kind of just, oh man, that's a problem with being a woman. So let's give you a medication that keeps you from kind of exhibiting or expressing that opportunity to be a woman. Is that something that we should also think about here? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. I love the way you think these questions that you come up with. No, pregnancy is not a bug in the system. Pregnancy is something that God ordained for. No, He ordained it for a man and a woman in a marriage relationship to, further family values and to continue life, beyond yourself. What I think I would talk to kids about here possibly is that sin has gotten in the way. If there wasn't the possibility of rape and trafficking, where those things are tragic, where a woman might find herself in a place where she didn't want to be pregnant, and she sure did not want to be pregnant by that man. Those are sin issues. So sin enters in because of the fall in the garden and the sin nature, which is real, and therefore man tries to fix the problem. And some of the fixes are ones that we would not necessarily go along with. That's probably the conversation I would have with kids.
I really like that. It kind of speaks to that issue of, the gospel, right? It's looking at the brokenness kind of sin, and how do we kind of look to maybe find redemption or restoration inside of that? And as we know, like the understanding our humanity and our identity inside of Jesus is really the best way to kind of take that. But it makes me kind of think through this maybe a little bit along that track, but maybe kind of a sideways part of that track. Because I think that when we look at this kind of contraception, I think it can kind of even like cheapen our understanding of what marital relations, if we're going to call it that, what marital relations are, right? It cheapens marriage. It cheapens marital relations. It cheapens kind of the byproduct of marital relations, which is children. I mean, how would you encourage us as parents and people who care for kids to talk about kind of these realities of sex and family rearing in our homes that really does celebrate kids and not just kind of make them, to use that phrase again, kind of a bug in the system of having marital relations? How do we kind of teach that for our kids when so much of the culture is telling us that you can kind of control when you get pregnant, control when you don't get pregnant, and if you do get pregnant, right, while using contraception, oh, that's a bug in the system, and we have to now do something different, which then cheapens marriage, cheapens marital relations, and actually cheapens kids, the byproduct. How can we teach our kids better in this moment?
Absolutely, because if that's your mentality, that the pregnancy was not supposed to happen, then abortion is right around the corner. And so it's your insights here are really significant. I wonder if part of it is talking with children earlier than we think is necessary about the purposes of marriage. I often say to young people who choose to be married that I'm proud of them, because I think it's easy today in our culture to live together and to have serial relationships. And I'm not going to really make a commitment. Just like there are fewer young people joining a church. They don't want to make a commitment. What if they decide a little bit after that they made the wrong decision? So what if we talked about, what if a married couple raising kids talked about why we got married and what are the benefits of marriage? And you and I can cite research that sexual intimacy in marriage is better than sexual intimacy outside of marriage, even if you have it fewer times, is what the research says. And that's also very true if you are a virgin when you get married, which, so many people think, oh, that's so old fashioned. It's actually really still a very, very healthy thing. Why? Because God ordained it that way, and God's ways are best. His boundaries are for our benefit. We need to talk to kids about that all the way across the board in any number of areas: character and, disobedience and obedience, and yes, sex within marriage and children. And so do our kids feel celebrated and wanted and liked and known and all of that by parents and siblings and grandparents and aunts and uncles? I think celebrating the multi-generational family is an important thing here. being open to their questions, answering their questions legitimately. Kids are going to be way more curious about sex and the making of babies earlier than ever before because of the culture and because of what they see on screens, as they're overlooking somebody's shoulder. So don't be shocked by the question and answer it age appropriately and keep answering it and let them know what you think is best about sexual intimacy.
Man, this is a really hard topic, especially in the wake of all the things that are happening inside of society. But as Dr. Kathy kind of highlighted, it is our opportunity, responsibility, privilege to really teach and encourage and guide our kids. So speaking well of the things that brought about the children in our lives and the community that our children are being reared in is really an important thing. It's something that I think that Moses was talking about when he was handing off basically the nation of Israel to Joshua. And it's an interesting part of Deuteronomy where Moses kind of rebukes the nation of Israel. And then he speaks this to the elders. He starts this in Deuteronomy chapter 32, beginning at verse 1. And this is what Moses says. Give ear, O heavens, and I will speak, and let the earth hear the words of my mouth. May my teaching drop as the rain, and my speech distill as the dew, like gentle rain upon tender grass, like showers upon the herb. For I will proclaim the name of the Lord, ascribe greatness to our God. And I'm going to pause here because Moses continues with essentially what is kind of referred to as a song that guides and encourages and rebukes and directs the nation of Israel to remember the Lord. And Moses wraps up this song in verse 44 of chapter 32 when he says, when it's written, Moses came and recited all the words of this song in the hearing of the people, he and Joshua the son of Nun. And when Moses had finished speaking all of these words to all of Israel, he said to them, now take heart, all the words by which I am warning you today, that you may command them to your children, that they may be careful to do all the words of this law. For it is no empty word for you, but your very life. And by this you shall live a long life in the land that you are going over the Jordan to possess. Now, I realize that this song isn't something that I've kind of presented to you, and you need to go back and probably read it out of Deuteronomy chapter 32. But what I'm trying to get at is the heart of Moses in this moment. It's one that he's almost passing off to the nation of Israel, this passion to know the Lord and remember him, to declare his greatness. And the speech that Moses is giving is like a refreshing rain or dew on the grass. It's gentle and it showers the herbs. And it's something that we're encouraged, not even encouraged maybe, like implored to teach it to our kids, that they would know the law and the order of God. And I really believe that that's what Dr. Kathy is getting at for us here, to teach the order and the design and the law of the Lord to those that we care for. And I think that as we do that, that's a bright light that cuts through the darkest times and gives confidence and courage to our kids and our community to live into the design of God. So I want to thank you for listening to the Celebrate Kids podcast in this daily segment of Facing the Dark. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, we're really looking forward to spending the week with you, and we'll see you here again tomorrow.